Welcome to Branding Room Only, the podcast where your personal brand gets a front row seat. I'm Paula Edgar, and if you're here, it's because you know your brand isn't just about what you do. It's about how people experience you. In each episode, you'll hear stories, strategies, and lessons from leaders and influencers who built their brands and made their mark. And I'll share the tools you need to do the same. Let's go. Hi, everybody. It's Paula Edgar, your host of Branding Room Only, and I'm very, very excited today about my conversation with my guest. Let me tell you about him. My guest today is Walter Pryor, and he is the Chief Administrative Officer and General Counsel at Southern Bancorp, a financial institute dedicated to serving underserved communities. He's a seasoned leader whose career spans law, government, corporate, and higher education. Walter is also the author of This Leaves Me Okay, a memoir inspired by nearly 30 years of weekly letters his grandmother, Mama Ceal, wrote to him. I can't wait for this conversation. Walter, welcome to the Branding Room.
Thank you so much, Paula. I'm glad to be with you.
Thank you. So let's jump on in. What does personal branding mean to you? How would you define it?
You know, it's such an interesting question. And I have to say, I think a lot of people don't give it as much thought as they probably should. And I count myself as one of them. Mm-hmm. I think that as much as I've given thought to it, it's probably around this idea of reputation and how you show up. And so I try to be mindful of that. And, you know, some of that just stems just from growing up. And I was going to say growing up in the South, but I think, you know, a lot of kids grow up with families who really invest in them and kind of have them focus on how they are presenting themselves. So I have a lot of that in me and that I think translates to some of it. But this idea of a personal brand in a lot of ways to me seems a lot more intentional and focused around it. And I don't know that I've been that focused and intentional as I probably could be. But the short answer to your question is I think a lot of it has to do with your reputation, but it feels like branding also is a bit more focused on how you build that and maintain it, perhaps.
Absolutely. I think you're right. My grandmother, my father, my mother always used to say, don't embarrass me when you walk out of the house, right? So there's that part. So I'm always thinking about how you're showing up. But to your point, strategy and thinking about intentionality around branding is the reason why I started this podcast, because I want people to really think about, even if it gets to you, what happens when you actually set the course yourself and then hit those milestones. So one of the things when it comes to branding that is important is how we identify ourselves. What are the things that we would want to be referred to when we're talking about ourselves? And so for you, describe yourself in 3 words or short phrases.
I think I would say I try to be genuine and, I guess, sincere, down to earth, and maybe a bit adventurous, but I know that's all relative, right? I think I have a wife. I'm born and raised in Arkansas, and my wife is from New York. And so when I say adventurous, that means something very different than when she says adventurous.
Knowing your wife, I'm nodding my head because that's very true. Very true. So tell me, do you have a favorite quote or motto that you are thinking about now or just generally in your life?
One of them, I guess, ties to our children. Both of our children have African middle names, but one of the meanings of their middle names is noble. And some years ago, I found this quote, and I think it's from Eastern Europe or something, but it's something like, be humble, for you are made of earth. Be noble, for you are made of stars. Ooh. And I really love that because it kind of captures both the grounding that I kind of hope that we give our kids and just I think is important for people in general, but also kind of sets up this blue sky reach that, you know, you're not tethered necessarily to anything and your dreams can be really whatever you want them to be. So I think that's one. And recently I actually came across, and I'll probably butcher it just a bit, but it's a James Baldwin quote. And it says something like, the people who say it can't be done are often or usually interrupted by the people who are trying to do it. Right. And so I love that as well, which really in some ways kind of ties to the previous quote, which is, you know, try it. Improbable things can actually happen if you just give effort to it.
I love that. I love that. And I think particularly, you know, reflecting on so many people think about their limitations, right? Both of the quotes that you just made were, you know, I think magic. like what the magic is that we can have when we aspire to what we were created for, which we don't know until we hit it, right? So I love that. Now let's get to the music. What is your hype song? So if they're getting full Walter Pryor on a stage or in a meeting, what's playing in your head as you're walking in?
So the
Or,
funny thing is, I don't know if I have anything that plays in my head, but I can tell you there's a song that I cannot be still if I happen to hear it, and it puts
okay,
me in a great mood.
okay,
And it's really funny because I came to go-go music later in
hmm
life. I was 20 something before I ever was introduced to it. But
hmm
I love the song by Chuck Brown, Chuck Baby. I don't know what
hmm
it is, but it always just makes me want to move. And
yes,
there are
no,
others, but that's the one that comes to mind.
that's a good one. I think that's our first go-go one. I think of every song that I ask folks as the Branding Ramoli soundtrack. I thought you were going to go with EU, and I was like, yes, let's go. I love it. So this question, asking this to you, really ties into a lot, but I want to ask it like I ask everybody else, which is, where did you grow up, and how do you think that shaped you?
So I grew up in Arkansas.
Hmm.
First few years of my life in a very small town, Forest City, Arkansas, actually named for the first Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan.
Well,
And then I know, right?
right.
And then Pine Bluff is where I spent most of my childhood from about 4 or 5 up until I went away to college. Also, not a huge town,
Hmm.
but I think there's a lot to be said for those kinds of humble roots
Hmm.
in terms of both keeping you grounded, but also in many ways building into a number of people, not everybody,
Hmm.
this desire to dream and see more and see bigger, right? And
Yeah.
so I think those are primarily the ways that growing up where I did
Hmm.
influenced me, right? Because I think I can never forget where I came from,
Hmm.
but it also helped me dream and go places I couldn't have even imagined.
Mm-hmm. So, how does a little boy in Arkansas get to your career path? To walk me through when you left for college, and then what happened? Where'd you go to college? Why did you choose it? Talk me through. Give me the Walter
So
story.
you make me think. I heard a minister talk about this not too long ago, and he said if you ever see a turtle on top of a fence post, you know he didn't get there on their own. And I think that is so apropos, particularly from the way you frame the question, a little
Yeah.
boy from Arkansas,
Hmm.
because we were not well off when I
Hmm.
was born,
Hmm.
and although I felt very rich in terms of having a family support system that just poured into me, right? And so
Hmm.
the short answer to your question is I did very well in school.
Good.
And I was fortunate that I had family who was supporting me,
Yeah.
who made me think that I was smart and celebrated when I did well in school. And it just
Hmm.
built this kind of love for learning and achievement. And that shaped a lot of what I did. Now, I will say, I think my sister is equally smart, but
Hmm.
we were very different in terms of if I'm in the math class,
Hmm.
we can both get an A. She's happy with the A. I want the top A. I want to know that I'm ahead of everybody else. So there's a little bit of that kind of,
Okay. Yes.
came
Yes.
in me.
Hmm.
But, I had a lot of people. I had a broad community of people who
Hmm.
supported me. And, my family, my
Hmm.
church family, my extended family of friends, instructors from elementary and high school up
Hmm.
through college. The year that I graduated from high school, I had been accepted and we were planning for me to go to Princeton.
Hmm.
3 weeks after I graduated from high school, my father died.
Oh,
And
wow.
I just did not feel comfortable going that far away.
Wow.
And Princeton had been a
Hmm.
dream of mine for years. And
Wow.
to have gotten it was like, wow, this really happened, right?
Wow. Yeah.
But I just didn't think that was what I was supposed to do. And nobody in my family said, oh, you shouldn't go this far or you need to stay close, be near your
Hmm.
mom. None of that. I
Hmm.
just made the decision that I needed to be closer. So
Hmm.
I ended up staying in the state and
Hmm.
attending a small liberal arts college affiliated with the Methodist Church, Hendrix College,
Hmm.
and had a really great experience. And
Hmm.
based upon that, I was able to go to law school at Georgetown. And
Hmm.
through that process, came in contact with a lot of people who
Mm-hmm.
poured into me. So professors, administrators. I ended up working with then U.S. Senator David Pryor, which
Mm-hmm.
really is what brought me to Washington, D.C. I had looked at other schools and was thinking I'd go, any other places that I had gotten accepted. But
Mm-hmm.
because he was a senator and it said, oh, you can work for me if you go to school in D.C.,
Mm-hmm.
I decided I would go to Georgetown. And I did
Mm-hmm.
work for him, off and on during my time in law school.
Love that.
So to me, it's kind of this, I don't know, evolution of
Mm-hmm.
support over time. And so I think I was able to take advantage of a lot of opportunities that were offered to me. And I think
Mm-hmm.
I was very fortunate that I had a lot of people who helped me be able to take advantage of those opportunities.
I love that. So then, after law school, how did you start out in the profession?
So I started in Biglaw. I went
Mm-hmm.
to Jones Day, Revis and
Mm-hmm.
Pogue at the time
Yes.
was the full
Yes.
name. They now just refer to themselves as Jones Day.
Mm-hmm.
But I went there and got really great training
Mm-hmm.
as a young lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at the time when I went to the firm, which is almost when dinosaurs roamed the earth, there were tons of people who were, they'd have real large first year classes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also a time where young associates were doing lots of document productions. Like you don't
Mm-hmm.
hear that anymore because you've got
Right.
AI and
Right.
contracts and what have you. But at
Mm-hmm.
that time, clients were actually willing to pay to,
Mm-hmm.
send your young associate to Hastings, Nebraska and sit in a conference room and go through boxes and boxes of documents. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what I did. And I actually had a real opportunity. Jones Day got this really big white collar crime case involving a bank in DC and some
Mm-hmm.
really high profile people. And I was one of the first associates on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a great training ground. I became the document guru, right? I knew all the important documents. And
Mm-hmm.
this is the funny thing. It started out when we were doing the representation. I was a person in charge of all the important documents. And those important documents were kept in a big 3-wing binder. That's how much we had no clue how big this case was going to be.
Paper.
But paper, exactly. And so every week or every, couple weeks, I was updating the binder with new tabs and new documents to go in the binder.
Mhm.
I mean, this case was so big that ultimately it took up rooms in a litigation center and everything was
Wow.
digitized at some point, right?
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And I knew those documents, but that meant because I knew the documents, I was kind of tied to that litigation room and those documents. And so
Mm-hmm.
as
Mm-hmm.
other associates came on, they were like going to New York because there was a U.S. attorney related case. And so they were
Mm-hmm.
going to monitor cases and do that. And I'm like, gosh, I really want to do that. I don't want to be stuck here with these documents. So
Yeah.
ultimately I left the firm because it just felt like I was pigeonholed into living in
Mm-hmm.
a litigation room that just
With
was
the
not
binder.
I with the binder. Exactly. They became digital binders, but yes. And I finally just went, I don't remember Perry Mason doing document productions, right? And I was ready to go. But
Mm-hmm.
I had a really great training and experience in big law. Went to
Mm-hmm.
small law firm after that.
Okay.
Spent some time at the Department of Justice. Worked
Mm-hmm.
with National Association of Attorneys General, and then went to work on Capitol Hill with the second Senator Pryor, the son of the original Senator Pryor that I worked
Oh,
with
no.
in
Okay.
college,
Wow.
which
Mm-hmm.
opened up a whole new path of opportunities for me to
Mm-hmm.
do government relations and then move into corporate sector. So I've just had a real kind of circuitous path through my career. And I laughed. I told somebody actually earlier today,
Mm-hmm.
my career looks like the cat following the red laser beam, as opposed to, my wife who very intentionally built a career in-house in corporate America. But it's been a great ride.
I love that analogy because you can just see it, right? But I have found that pretty much every person I've spoken to, and I think it's now up to like almost 10 general counsel and folks who are high in their professions, et cetera, none of them hit that line. That line that they set was never the thing that they actually did, or they took some risky detours that ended up working for them, which I kind of love. I think that we should have goals and intentions. My listeners know I talk about goals and intentions all the time, but also being open to what life might bring to you, I think is a really helpful thing. Okay, so here we are in your current role. You're leading a financial institution that serves underserved communities, right? So how do you tie that into your brand as an executive slash leader?
Well, I think it almost goes back to where we started. You asked, how
Mhm,
did a little boy from Arkansas end up, in the roles and places where I've been?
mhm,
And part of what attracted me to Southern Bancorp is the fact that its entire reason for being is to
mhm,
address the needs of and underbanked communities. And
mhm,
with the focus beginning in the Delta region of Arkansas and Mississippi.
mhm,
Those are my people. I mean, if
mhm,
I look back, I'm my family is the very group of people that we've, as an institution, sought to help, right?
mhm.
Now, interestingly enough, the idea for the bank came from South Shore Bank in Chicago.
Huh.
Then Governor Bill Clinton learned
Mhm.
of that bank, and he wanted to bring that concept to the Delta because he was very clear.
Interesting.
There were a number of people,
Mhm,
minorities, rural, white,
mhm,
you know,
mhm,
people
mhm,
for whom large financial institutions weren't an option, or they weren't
mhm.
interested, or they weren't focusing on financial literacy and helping those communities really build wealth.
Right.
And so that has been the focus and mission of the organization since its
Mhm.
inception. And so when
I
I
love
had
that.
the opportunity to join, I leapt at it because it feels full circle in a lot of ways in terms of being able to take what I've learned,
Mhm,
leverage the experiences I have, and use
mhm,
it in a way to support a really strong mission that is really meaningful to me. Now you would
mhm.
think I'm the person, handing out money or making loans or whatever. And I actually serve the people who serve our clients. But
Right.
I love the mission and I love the lives that we are changing,
Mhm,
through the work that we're doing.
mhm. I think mission focused and values focused work just helps you to show up differently as a leader, right? As opposed to, it's not just a job. I love that you connected it to, this would have been your people should they have had access to this. And so I'm glad I asked you that question. So you've mentioned your wife a couple times already. Shout out to Juliet Pryor. I wonder for you, how would you say personal relationships affect your ability to manage and build your brand?
Well, I will tell you, probably my number one source of guidance, inspiration, mentoring is my
Mhm,
wife. And I feel that in the way that I was less focused around building my career, I think she was very much focused.
mhm,
And that's not to say that she didn't hit those kind of hiccups that you talked about, or
mhm,
setbacks, or
mhm,
detours,
mhm,
but I think she knew very early on she
mhm,
didn't really want to do law firms, although she's
mhm,
done a law firm before, and I
mhm,
think had a positive experience. But
mhm,
she found you know, the place where she really could be herself and bring the greatest contribution was in house,
mhm,
working as a business partner.
mhm,
And I came late to that party because I did a whole bunch of other things before I went in house. But
mhm,
it has been hugely beneficial for me to watch her
mhm,
as an in house business professional, albeit a lawyer,
mhm,
but a leader, manager, mentor in terms of how I try to pattern myself as a leader.
mhm,
I found, years ago, before I was in a position of really leading people and having to make difficult decisions and have
mhm.
difficult conversations. I was watching her do it and I was like, wow, I'm so glad I don't have to do that. But I also was happy to learn how to
Mhm,
do that and to observe it and to finally when I am in a place where I have to have a lot of difficult conversations, I've had a model for it and I understand how to lean into that. So I do think personal relationships, whether it's from mentors, whether
mhm,
it's from actual work experience where you get to observe various
mhm,
people, or you have people who take the time to teach you.
mhm,
I think they all go into the leader and manager that you become. I
mhm,
think it's really my very first opportunity to be a manager. I was so determined not to be the poor managers that I had been,
mm.
on to the complete opposite end of the spectrum. And I was so close to the people that I managed that it was
Mhm,
difficult to have those
mm.
difficult conversations, to
Yeah.
offer constructive critique because I was hampered by this inability to hurt their feelings, right?
Mm. Mhm,
Whereas fortunately, I think I've been able to kind of create a bit more of a balance and try
mhm,
to be the type of manager or leader who people trust, who
Mm-hmm.
they, know is sincere about helping develop them and invest in them, but who
Mm-hmm.
also, has the wherewithal to say, I need to call you out on this, or I
Yeah.
need to bring this to your attention, and not just for the sake of being mean or just the business, but also I
Mm-hmm.
think it's fairer to people when you
Mm-hmm.
call them out and tell them here's a place where you're falling short, as opposed to sit
So,
back and let it
mm-hmm.
happen, and then they reap the
Agreed.
consequences without really understanding or appreciating how they got there.
It's true. I definitely believe that constructive criticism, feedback, etc., while it may hurt, because I always say no one wants feedback unless it's good and they ask for it, right? But when you get it, when done properly, it's a way to love you, right? It's a
It's a
way to
gift.
be able to
It's
say
a
I'm invested in you. Yeah,
Absolutely, completely
yeah.
agree.
Speaking of love and investment, I want to piggyback up on that question I asked you about personal relationships, because you also mentioned your children. How would you say that being a parent has helped to shape your brand or your leadership trajectory?
Well, I think it probably the influence that being a parent has
Hmm.
had on me probably occurs even more now as my children are becoming adults,
Hmm.
because when they were smaller, I could just kind of say, you do this because. Now, I didn't want to be the one because I said so. And we often explained a lot to the kids so they
Hmm.
understood and whatever. But, I had the upper hand and I could tell them what to do and they had to
Right.
do it.
Yeah.
The real challenge is influencing a young adult who
Yep.
can make whatever decision they want to make in spite of whatever my wishes are, my influence, my directing. And so, really understanding and appreciating another adult who
Hmm.
doesn't have to take your advice or your
Hmm.
direction,
Yeah.
and realizing how you frame that in a way so that they understand you are
Hmm.
offering this leadership guidance with their best interests at heart, that they
Hmm.
can trust your intentions, that they
Yeah.
respect you as another individual, and realize they can't necessarily dominate you or
Hmm.
command you to do something. I think that it builds an approach to leadership that other people are receptive to, right? And
Yeah.
and and they
Yeah.
can respond to in a way that, you know, engenders mutual respect and a willingness to take your advice and your mentorship.
Hmm. Hmm. I think that that's true. I have my daughter is 20 and my son is 13. And I always say it teaches me I have no control over anything. One. And it reminds me that my therapist always says that after children are 13, which my son is now, you're not parenting them anymore. You are mentoring them. And so, within workplaces, with other places where you have influence, it is more like mentorship than it is like parenting. But it is sobering because I like the just do what I say because that's part.
It's
Because
easier.
it is easier. I said to my daughter the other day, if I could, as a parent, choose anything, it would be to give you every mistake that I've ever seen, so you don't have to make that mistake. But that's not how the world works. You have to make your own
No.
mistakes, and it may be the same ones I made before. Sigh, sigh, sigh. Anyway,
Yeah.
so family, I think, is important to both of us, and I really love that you have incorporated family and personal relationships into your new book. This leaves me okay. Why did you decide to write it?
Well, thank you very much for asking about it. That's when I mentioned earlier, improbable things can happen. I think this book is one of those kind of improbable things. And just to give you a little background, my grandmother was born in 1915
Hmm.
in rural Jim Crow, Arkansas, only had an eighth grade education, and yet she wrote me weekly over the span of 30 years from the time I was born until she died.
Wow.
And she was my person, right?
Hmm.
She just was this mythical creature for me in terms of she was so loving, so supportive, amazing sense of humor, lots of fun, taught me to play cards. She could fish, garden, sew, needlepoint, crochet, cross
Wow.
stitch, and she was an amazing cook. I mean,
Hmm.
and not just, Southern food that, you're accustomed to getting in the
Hmm.
South or
Hmm.
as a Black family, but she could take any recipe out of any magazine and make it perfectly the first time she did it.
Wow.
And so she was just this Renaissance woman before I even knew what a Renaissance woman was.
Mhm.
And so I learned a lot about her life. I knew a lot about her life, but I learned even more after she died.
Mhm.
And that, coupled with the fact that even though I didn't have the presence of mind to save her letters as I was
Mhm.
growing up,
Mhm.
when I was in law school, I actually started sticking them in my desk drawer. And not even because I was consciously saving them. I think that's just where I read them or where I put them. And so I'd
Mhm.
stick them in a drawer. So by the time I graduated from law school, I must have had, I don't know, 3 dozen, maybe,
Wow.
or more of her letters. So
Mhm.
then after she died and my wife, Juliet, knew
Mhm.
I had this cache of letters, she
Mhm.
said, "You should write a book." And I said, "Juliet, I'm not writing a book." And that went on for several years because I had just resolved I couldn't do it, or I didn't feel confident enough in
Mhm.
my writing to
Mhm.
measure up to what I consider to be good writing.
Mhm.
I love books. I love amazing writers.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to put out something that was a piece of crap. So I resisted it forever.
Mhm.
But I finally got to the place where I really recognized her influence on me. And I thought, this would be a really great way to honor her.
Mhm.
And I don't even know that I had any idea of what writing a successful book looked like. I mean, well, I guess I did. I mean, I know there's a New York Times bestseller and everybody's talking
Yes.
about so and so's book or so and so's book. I wasn't even thinking about that. I'm just like,
Mhm.
how does little old me write a book that's not a
Right.
piece of crap and that just does well? Um, so again, long answer to your very short question.
Mhm.
The point of me writing the book really was to honor my grandmother's life.
Mhm. Was this your maternal grandmother or your paternal grandmother?
My maternal grandmother. I actually
Mhm.
didn't know my paternal grandmother for very long before she died.
Mhm.
I want to say maybe six
Mhm.
or seven
Mhm.
when she died. And I just we saw her periodically, but I didn't see her as regularly as I saw my mother's mother. And so I just wasn't able to build as much of a relationship with her.
Got you. So your grandma's Mama Ceal, is that Lucille?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So did you ever talk to her about why she wrote you these letters?
Never. It never
Mhm.
occurred to me, and the letters came so regularly that I could almost take them for granted. I mean, one of
Mhm.
the things I write about in the book is one of my earliest memories is
Mhm.
of my mother reading a letter to me and my sister
Mhm.
that my grandmother had sent us. So before I could read, she was sending us letters. And I
Mhm.
remember her, you know, my mother reading to us. And I don't know where I got this. I don't know. No one ever told me this, but I
Mhm.
had this sense that if you get mail, you're important, right? It's a big deal to get some mail. And
It's true.
so it just started. And so I was accustomed to getting mail from my grandmother.
Mm-hmm. I just had a memory because my grandmother did not write me over 30 years, but she would send me $5 in the mail. like, and she had perfect penmanship. And so I love having that reflection because it's so important. And you think about what they must have gone through in their own lives and why this was an important way of connecting. What do you think those letters taught you about identity, resilience, or anything else? What were some of the things that came from what she wrote you?
Well, I don't know if it's so much what she wrote at the time or
Mm-hmm.
upon my reflecting upon
Reflection.
them. But,
Hmm.
I mentioned she only had an eighth grade education.
Right.
I don't know if I said she was a maid for,
Mm-hmm.
the most of the time that we shared the planet.
Hmm.
As a matter of fact, she only stopped working as a maid the year that
Hmm.
I graduated from law school. So she had been a maid
Okay.
for 40 plus years.
Wow.
And when you think about it, you go, why would this woman who's working almost 7 days a week, not fully, but sometimes,
Hmm.
why would she spend her time writing letters? And what was
Mm.
it that made her think that she should write letters, that she
Right.
could write letters? It
Right.
certainly wasn't, an activity of people who weren't, who didn't have a lot of leisure time.
Right.
And so it just kind of put me on this path of discovery. And I think in a lot of ways, she wrote
Hmm.
letters to keep our family connected because she had experienced really poor treatment by some of her family early on.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think she had experienced a number of tragic events that,
Hmm.
kind of threatened the existence of family. And I think she
Hmm.
wanted to shore that up and make sure we were there.
Hmm.
But I think it was also a lesson in just, how she brought about her own wellness and self-care. And I think that was something that she enjoyed doing. And so she did it. And so through doing something for herself, she did a
Mm-hmm.
lot for other people, just from the standpoint of being remembered or
Yeah.
getting mail, the importance of getting mail or
Mm-hmm.
the thoughtfulness of it. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think when I put it into perspective, it reminds me that you don't have to be in some large position of influence
Mm-hmm.
or to have some important title to really make a difference for people, to really
Mm-hmm.
impact their lives in a positive way.
Yeah.
Certainly it adds even to me, adds even more responsibility if you do have some big title or a position of influence to use that in a way to help other people and to better their lives to the extent that you can.
Oh, absolutely. I've talked on my podcast before about my love of clothing and how I show up came a lot from my grandmother. My grandmother was a domestic as well, and she worked for rich white people in Long Island. And she would come home with clothes, designer clothes that she was like, these are clothes that they're wearing. I want you to wear these clothes too, so that even though she didn't, I would have. And so when I think about how I show up someplace, it literally is that lens and that importance of just looking the part my grandmother gave me from when I was very, very, I remember people would be like, why do you have a train coat? I didn't even know what a train coat was. But I was like,
I
but I have
love
one
that.
because my grandma bought me one. Right. And so those things are really important. And the blessing of being able to have grandparents that incorporate their values into us is a great thing. It's a great thing.
So I
Yeah.
froze up for just a little bit. I,
Okay.
I heard you saying that
Mhm.
you didn't even know what a train coat was, and then it froze for a bit. So
I did not. No, no worries. I mean, it basically said that the importance of you just don't know what somebody is giving to you in terms of how it's going to result in your ethos, right? The values, the
mhm,
things that are important to you based on how they modeled for you. Because to your point about your grandma having an eighth grade education, you just think about writing, reading, and what she was trying to maybe instill in you without maybe knowing is the practice of it, right? So I
mhm.
love that you took the letters and made them into a book, right? Like that's might have been her wildest dream. And so I just love it. So the book weaves family history with broader civil rights, right? And that the story. Why was that an important piece of how you brought this into the story? And what impact do you hope it has on the readers?
Well, I think certainly for my grandmother, people
Mm-hmm.
born at the time that she was, and our family's experience being based in the South,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Jim Crow was almost an actual character in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just a condition in which you live, but I mean, it was a part of how you moved around, how you were able
Mm-hmm.
to show up, how you were able
Right.
to operate. And I think to some degree, even though it's not Jim Crow, there's
Mm-hmm.
still elements of challenge around race that our
Yeah.
country is still grappling with. And
Absolutely.
so I thought that in addition to honoring her life, I felt like there were lessons to be learned from her life in terms of navigating just challenges in general.
Yeah.
It's really interesting that the book came out when it did because as I was writing it, I
Mm-hmm.
would have been happy to have it published a few years ago because
Yeah.
I finished and I was ready for it to go. But it's interesting that it came out now in this particular period of time as we
Yeah.
find challenges to really observing and acknowledging history, not
Yeah.
classifying it as good or bad, just acknowledging that it's history, right? And
Right.
so I feel like there were so many lessons in her life
Mm-hmm.
around how to navigate really difficult situations and
Mm-hmm.
still maintain some joy and some
Mm-hmm.
dignity and
Mm-hmm.
some ability to dream beyond what's right in front of you. And
Yeah.
so I felt like it was very important to both acknowledge the challenges that she experienced and to
Mm-hmm.
draw a parallel between how I experience similar challenges and how my
Yeah.
children experience those challenges
Yeah.
and to hopefully issue a call to arms to keep moving forward in addressing this so that at some point someone in my line will not have to say that they're still dealing with those kinds of challenges.
Ooh. I gotta take a deep breath on that one because it's so true, right? Particularly where we are societally right now, erasure of not just textbooks, but also, folks' actual stories and commemorations of people's lives. It is even more important for us to tell these stories and to make sure that they are honored and remembered as not political, but very, very much personal, which is still history, right? It's
Exactly.
still our history.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The other aspect of that though is that
Mm-hmm.
it also underscored for me how important it is that we be the custodians and guardians of our own history, whether that's
Mm-hmm.
as a people
Mm-hmm.
or as family members, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I have a responsibility to my children for them to
Mm-hmm.
know that there was this strong woman who
Mm-hmm.
navigated really crazy times to
Yeah.
have this huge impact on me and them even. My
Yep.
daughter, of my children, my daughter was the only one who was able to meet my grandmother before she died.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so much about her influence
Mm-hmm.
that has impacted them, even if they can't tie a direct line to it, or maybe they can now that I've written the book. But to know that her legacy continues to live in the
Mm-hmm.
way that my children show up is really, really rewarding.
So when you think about legacy, when you think about perhaps one day having grandchildren, what do you want to give to them?
I'd like to give them a sense of belonging, that they
Mm-hmm.
matter, that they can do anything they set their hearts and minds to,
Mm-hmm.
that they have every right to be here, to show
Mm-hmm.
up as their authentic selves, whatever that might be, in whatever form that might be.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that cumulatively our family has helped contribute to
Mm-hmm.
an environment that makes that possible and
Yeah.
that helps usher in progress for those who come after us.
I love that. I love that. Um, Legacy is a really, I think, important thing for lots of folks, but particularly when you think about the history that Black people have had in this country and in other countries as well. It's often so fractured to be able to even go back and tell a story and to have some, history and some cadence. I'm fast forwarding to Grandpa Walter sending an email every week. Right, which is not the same story, but it's the same kind of love, right? Like that connection. It's a powerful thread to be able to say that you were loved in such a deep and wonderful way. And so I'm happy you shared it with folks.
Well, I hope Grandpa Walter is actually putting some pen to paper and continuing the legacy of actually sending mail. Now, it may be such that, nobody will be sending mail and getting mail then, but,
Right.
if they're still selling stamps and envelopes, I may not be doing weekly, but I hope that I'm sending somebody some letters at
I
some
love
point.
that. I say that as I used AI to help write my emails to my son this summer, but there's a whole nother, I still love him. It's all good. So tell me this. I ask everybody about fun. What do you do for fun? Because I think we talk so much about, this is what we do for work and, but I want to know what brings you joy.
I really, we've gotten into a big travel kick. And so
Mm-hmm.
I've really loved traveling and getting to discover and see other places, which again, for me as a small child, growing up watching television, it's like, oh wow. You know,
Yeah.
there are these things called cruise ships that people go on, or, people actually fly in planes. I mean,
Yes.
I want to say I was in the 8th grade before I took
Mm.
my first flight. And by
Wow.
the time I graduated from college, I could still count the number of airplane rides I had taken, maybe on one hand, if not one, two. Whereas,
Wow.
my kids, they can't even tell you. They couldn't, at 10 years old, they couldn't tell you how many planes they had been on because they had been on
Hmm.
so many,
So
right?
many.
And
Yeah.
so there's something fun and joyous about that evolution.
Hmm.
And so I really do love traveling.
Hmm.
I enjoyed writing the book. I don't
Yeah.
know if I'll write another, but as difficult as it was, I'm
Hmm.
not opposed to exploring a continued creative side.
Mm-hmm.
there have been times where I really wanted to engage in photography, and I bought a camera, and then I didn't do anything, or then whatever. So I
Mm-hmm.
have in my head that at some point I'm going to take up photography again and really just try to explore what kind of eye I have for that. So that's been fun.
Yeah.
I grew up as a kid who loved TV, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
not. Juliet will say I'm still a TV fiend, but I don't watch as much as I probably could. But I do love movies, and
Yeah.
cinema and movies are also things that
Mm-hmm.
I find fun. And then we are such social people in many ways, and we
Yeah.
have beyond our immediate family, we have extended family of friends and people that we really enjoy. So
Yeah.
spending time with them, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's, dinner or traveling or whatever it is, that
Mm-hmm.
also brings me joy.
You know what? When I was thinking about what you were saying about photography, first of all, my father's a photographer, so I come from a line of folks who have documented everything, and both of my children are photographers, and I love a camera, although it's usually just my phone, but that's not the point. But I remember visiting your home and seeing art. I mean, I was like this. So I studied museum anthropology when I was in undergrad, and it's really how people walk through a space. And I was like, this is like a museum. Look at this beautiful art. And I find that folks who collect art, there's something about the experience they want to have in their spaces as well too. And I just love that. It's probably when I fell in love. I was like, I love Juliet. I know I just met her, but I love her. Because, and by extension, you, because it was your home. So I wanted to just throw that piece in because then it could be that you're putting up your own photography on the walls,
Well, I'm
right?
glad you said that, because I forgot to mention that is something else that we've really enjoyed
Mhm,
doing.
mhm,
And in some ways, it kind of ties you to both the past and the future, because,
mhm,
obviously there are artists who everybody loves and adores, and you're like, oh my God, maybe I could own one of those pieces one day. But,
yes.
a few years ago, someone said to me, living artists have to eat. And
Mm,
we were already looking at emerging artists, but that really cemented for me that
mhm,
I want my focus to be more on these young people or younger
mhm.
people who are
Yeah.
contributing, not so much on the ones that are already out there that it's hard to buy and are too expensive and whatever, but
Yeah.
really investing in the creators who are coming along. So
Mhm.
that does also bring me joy, so thank you for reminding me of that.
Of course, and I love that as a way of continuing to support folks who are up and coming. I mean, that's also legacy, right? That you're making sure that people can continue to make that art, right?
Sure.
Because they can eat. Yeah. Yes, I'm going to remember that. Young artists have to eat that part. They're living. Okay. So I ask everyone on my podcast these two questions. One is this: what is the authentic aspect of your personal brand that you will never compromise on?
I think that is trying my best to always be down to earth and accessible.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember being a small child and thinking, "Oh, I shouldn't go talk to this person," or they're too important for me to matter. And I
Mm-hmm.
never want to do that for people, because I think you can influence people in so many different ways, but
Mm-hmm.
I always want to be down to earth. I don't want to be someone who's putting on air, someone who's
Mm-hmm.
unkind, because I
Mm-hmm.
think it's just so important to just being a human being.
Yeah. Yes. You've used the through word and through line of importance has been a part of this conversation, right? You got mail, so you were important, and you and you want to make sure that you're not too important that people don't feel like you're accessible. So I love that connection. So this podcast is called Branding Room Only because it's a play on the word standing room only because I'm clever. And so what is the authentic, fabulous aspect of you that people would be in a room with no chair, every chair filled, only standing room only to experience about you? What's that special magic that you have?
Wow. I hope it is it's an accessibility. It's a
Mm-hmm.
down to earth, approachable quality
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't take myself too seriously
Mm-hmm.
and is willing to be open and sharing. And if I have it and if I know it, I want you to have it and know it too. Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm thankful that I'm not one of those people who sees life as a zero sum game. And
Mm-hmm.
I genuinely believe a rising tide lifts all boats. And if I can
Agree.
help lift somebody else, then I absolutely want to do that. And
I love that.
at some point, I don't want you just to rise with me. I want you to rise even higher than me. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's how you really contribute. So that, and it's the whole concept of planting trees under which, whose shade you'll never sit under. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's what I hope people will see in me is the desire to give, to share, to pour into people, and to help move us all forward collectively.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think it's clear that Mama Ceal would have been very proud of you, and she planted a seed that became leaves, that became these pages that you have put together in honor of her. And I'm so happy that you have shared this. And I'm telling you all to make sure you go get this book and share it with a friend, and then share it with another friend, and tell them about this podcast so you can hear the story behind the story. Walter, tell folks how they can connect with you and get the book. Anything else you want to share
Sure.
as we close?
Sure. So you can get the book on Amazon if you want to support through that way.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like using Amazon, if you research Pyramid Books, Art, and Framing, it's a small Black-owned bookstore in Little Rock, Arkansas. They will have signed copies of the book. And so you can order through there.
Fantastic.
You can, hopefully my website's going to be up by the end of this week. It's been a long process, but walterpryor.com, you can go there. You can reach me on Instagram at Retlaw, RETLAW, which is basically Walter spelled backwards, then my middle and last initial.
Love it.
And then I'm Walter Pryor on both Facebook and LinkedIn. So
Love it.
any of those avenues are ways to reach me.
Fantastic. And I know by the time that this podcast comes out, your website will be up, shining, and viral by that time, because everybody will be there. It's all good.
From your mouth to God's ears. Yes, please.
Well, thank you for joining me, everybody. Make sure, like I said, you listen, you share. And if you love this podcast, and I know that you did, tell a friend about it. And I'll see y'all soon in the branding room. Bye, all. That's it for this episode. I appreciate you hanging out with me on Branding Room Only. Now, please do me a quick favor. Head over to ratethispodcast.com/branding so more people can join this conversation. And make sure to stop by paulaedgar.com/events to see what's next. Whether I'm live, online, or in person, I'd love to see you there. See you next time in the branding room. And until then, stand tall, shine bright, and always stand by your brand.